chat up is because today we're going to talk about controllers. We're going to talk about types of controllers, the most common types of controllers in fighting games. Howdy doody, thank you for the first. Yo, let's go, dog. Hopefully the music's not too loud compared to me. If it is, I can just turn this shit down because there's no other noise right now, right? So let's look at some controllers, shall we? Let's start with the most common controller type, and it's very apt. It's very apt that this picture is so much smaller than the rest. I'm gonna let you know now. This is a Dualshock 4. This is a standard controller, a controller that comes with a console of whatever you're choosing. This is what we in the fighting game community call a pad. And we call this a pad because when most people play, they use the D-pad. Right? I don't have access to all these controllers, so I'm not gonna be able to do this for all of them, right? So this is called controller, a D-pad, a pad, right? Whatever you want to call it. This is the most common type of controller you're gonna see when playing fighting. When playing any game, honestly, right? If you're playing on console, very common to see a lot of people using the standard controller that comes with console. When it comes to a DualShock 4, I think that they're not the worst D-pads ever, to be fair. DualShock 4 specifically aren't complete as, but like depending on the type of controller that you get, some are better than others, right? There's a lot of controllers that have some big flaws. I don't know how the fuck we ever play on on Xbox 360 pads. Those are the worst. That D-pad, the disc D-pad, is the absolute worst, and I hope I never have to deal with that again, ever. Okay. I just made it smaller. There we go. That was an accident. And I'm not a control Z, right? So this is going to be your standard controller. You're going to see a lot. The cool thing about these things is when a couple generations ago, they were significantly cheaper. You broke one, all you have to do is buy a new one. These things are like $70 now. Okay, so if you break a pad, replacing it with a new pad is kind of a pain in the ass. The most portable though, which is really cool. When you think about portability, this is the most portable and easiest form factor to take with you, no matter where you go when it comes to playing fighting games. The next type of controller that we want to look at is the one that most of us know. An arcade stick! An arcade stick in their many different forms. Different layouts, including the Vuelix, which is this, and the Noir, which is this back here that has the joystick, and the joystick further away from the buttons, and the buttons arced more naturally towards your hands instead of 2 down and 3 in a straight line. Actually 6 in a straight line. And these have their own advantages and disadvantages, like being able to use your entire arm, right, with the motions of quarter circles, right? So if you're holding it like this, or like this, or like this, however you hold your fucking joystick, you weirdos, in between your fingers like this, you know, it's easier to do. Quarter circle motion, Z motion, right? Now there's one thing, there's more space vertically, horizontally, right here, right? So it takes longer to go from forward to back and up to down than it does on a controller or on a regular pad than it does on any of the controllers that we're going to look at today. And that's cool for some people, and other people competitively, this is an antiquated thing, right? This is a thing of the past. Faster controllers are the future, right? Having access to all 8 face buttons, or at least 6 face buttons on the front right here, right? So you play with either these 6 buttons here, or these 6 buttons here, usually, right? Most people don't play with all 8 buttons. And that makes it so that you have access to more buttons than you do on the face of something like a DualShock 4, right? So the DualShock 4, if you're trying to use only one hand, right, for your button, and you don't want to have to play it like this, like a claw style, right? So you have access like this. This is claw. If you don't want to have to play like that, or like this, which is on the front, and use these 2 fingers like that, right? Which just looks odd, right? Especially on something this tiny. That's not a comfortable hand position. That probably would hurt over time, right? If you're playing that for long periods of time. These 4 buttons aren't enough for a lot of games, right? A lot of games are 6-button games, so you need those 2 triggers up on the side. That's where other specialty pads come in. We're just gonna look at this normal ass DualShock 4, right? Having access to all 8 of your face buttons on the front of the stick, 6 normally, is a big upside. It's a big plus for a lot of people. That's why a lot of people use arcade sticks. But the next thing that people are getting there, that people are moving their way into, inching their way ever closer to the ultimate, the prime, the alpha, the omega, the strongest controller that there is currently, is the Hitbox. Having there's 2 styles to this controller, and I think that this is the more This is the better one for most 2D games, if we're being honest. For most games, for the vast majority of games, this is probably the better controller of the two. I prefer the other, but we'll look at this one first. This is the Hitbox. Very standard, A button, viewless layout. I think that's viewless. It might be noir. Looks like a viewless layout. It looks like it comes down a little bit. Maybe it's noir, but then there's 4 buttons for movement. Back, forward, down, up, right? I'm sorry, maybe it's down is the very back one. Then it's forward, back, and up. I don't remember the directions. I have no clue. I'll have to figure it out. I need to anyway because I'm working on a stick project for a buddy of mine. Or a button box project for a buddy of mine. Anyways. And then you still have access to all 8 of your face buttons. Now, the reason why this is probably the most practical is because it's almost like typing, right? And because you can use shortcuts where you return back to neutral quicker by pressing 2 of the same button with simultaneous opposite cardinal direction cleaning, SODC cleaning, right? And also being able to act faster for blocking, for dashing, for jumping, right? It's literally a button. There is no travel between a joystick, right? This is essentially a stickless arcade stick, right? So it has all the upsides of having all 8 face buttons on the front, but then it also has the upside of pad, where pad has legitimate buttons with no travel, right? For up, down, left, and right. I think this is like the prime controller. This is probably the strongest controller that we have for fighting games, right? The closest thing to this would be something like a keyboard or a Mixbox. Mixbox. Right? And so what a Mixbox is for those who are actually more comfortable using their left down upright arrows, like so, right? Like I'm doing right now. You guys hear that? I don't know if you guys can hear that. Right? Anyways, left down upright arrow keys on a keyboard for fighting games, right? Because a lot of people grew up playing fighting games on a computer. They didn't have consoles. They played on computer. And there's a lot of fighting games now that are on computer and they work relatively well on a keyboard, right? Like you can pretty much use any input device you want. A lot of Brawlhalla players, I've noticed, there's a lot of Brawlhalla players who do not play on pad. They do not play on a standard controller. They don't plug in a controller. They bring a keyboard. They use a mechanical keyboard most of the time to play Brawlhalla at a competitive level. I've seen it. I was confused about it at first, but it makes sense when you think about the fact that most of the people who play Brawlhalla competitively are probably on PC. Why buy a controller if you have the input device right in front of you? Now, kind of hard to take a keyboard and mouse or a keyboard to all your fancy smancy fighting game tournaments, so it's probably better to buy something like this. And now your buttons, when it comes to controlling the actions of your character, not the movement, but the attacks, are bigger buttons. You know, standard Sanwa style or 30mm buttons. That's all they have to be, is 30mm button. That's pretty sick. This is my preferred controller. I like to play a lot of 3D games, so up being the thing about Hitbox versus Mixbox is this, all of your fingers have a place, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. These fingers, these 3 right here, not including the pinky. So these 3 and this all have a place on the Mixbox, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers, not including your pinky. Your pinky kind of sits up like this. Maybe you lean it down, whatever. But it could sit up kind of like this, as if you're fancy. This, unfortunately, 3 fingers sit, and you cannot, unless you're putting your ring finger up and you're using your pinky for back and your ring finger for down. Unless you're doing that, you are more than likely only using 3 fingers. And when you need to transition to up, you have to use your middle finger, this one right here, to slide to up. That's the main difference between this and a Hitbox, right? And for 3D games, it doesn't really matter too much. For 2D games, it seems easier to just use something like a Hitbox. But this is just more comfortable for those who are already accustomed to WASD or left, down, left, right, up, down, right? If you're already used to that, this is probably the controller for you. When it comes to competitive advantage for each of these controllers, I'm going to be quite honest. I think that this is the most antiquated way to play a fighting game. If whatever fighting game you play came out after 2002, 2003, right? After Marvel vs. Capcom 2. If your game came out after Marvel vs. Capcom 2, this was kept in mind for the making of that game. They've made sure that every game that has came out after the arcade era works just fine on a pad. You do not have to spend the extra money to play on something. I was about to grab a stick that's not put together. To play on something like this. You do not have to spend the extra money for something like this. By the way, this is actually less than a DualShock 4 brand new on Amazon right now. It's like $70. So it's like the same price as a DualShock 4. Them big words, son, Kokona, I don't know nothing about antiques. I said antiquated. It's antiquated. Well, yes, I guess you're right. It is dead technology. It is. Oh God, I dropped that stick. Yikes! It's no longer the most optimal way to play fighting games. I don't think that stick is gonna disappear. There's so many people who grew up in arcades, like the feel of stick. One second, let me click this stick. There's so many people who grew up in arcades, like the feel of an arcade stick, and DS4 is shit. DS4 is the standard controller, unfortunately, this generation of fighting games, because the DualShock 5 or the DualSense is worse than this, and currently most fighting games, especially in an offline setting, are played on PS4. So this is what we're going to see the most, right? You don't have to spend the extra money to get one of these that I have on the screen, one of those things that I just had behind me that I dropped on the floor, just to play a fighting game. Competitively, I don't think that a stick is going to give you much more advantage than buying something like this. What's the name of that controller? And buying something like this. This is, if I'm not mistaken, a $40 or $60 controller that has all of the access to the DualShock 4's up, down, left, right on this side, and then also has access to 6 face button on the other side, kind of like an arcade stick. Or if you're an old head like me and you already have one, let me zoom this camera in. Let me zoom this bad boy in. Something like this. The Hori Fighting Commander 4? Hori Fighting Commander, I don't remember which one it is. Once again, three buttons on this side. And then your D-pad on this side. And this one's really sick because you can actually angle your D-pad if you want to. You can turn this shit. You can angle this bitch. It's kind of clean. It's pretty sick. Right? And a lot of people, they don't usually play these like a center controller where they hold it like this. You know, they don't do this. They usually set it down on something and do this. And now they have access to their fingers on possibly 4 buttons at a time. And then they move with this hand right here. Very simple. Very easy, right? This is like the poor man's version of an arcade stick. And I think that it's probably better, honestly, than an arcade stick, right? But I just love arcade sticks. I'm gonna play them, right? Now, the thing I think is the best, for portability at least, these are definitely better than an arcade stick, and they're better than the standard, controller that only has 4 buttons on the front. That is why these are specifically tailor-made for fighting games. This is a fight pad, right? The Razor Ryan, the Hori Fighting Commander, there was a Mad Catz one. I heard it was ass. I heard it sucked. There was a Mortal Kombat one. Once again, I heard it sucked. But their collector's items are pretty cool. I need to pick myself up one of the Mortal Kombat 11, one of the Mortal Kombat X ones, just to have it. Now that we're done talking about the pad, I shouldn't have got rid of that. Oh well, we have a different pad. We have a better pad on the screen. Antiquated way to play fighting games. All right, totally obsolete. But hey, it's not about being the most competitive. But if you are worried about that, this is not the way to do it, right? Even if the PCB is extremely fast, you still have travel in between this. You still have a mechanical part in here, right, that has 4 micro switches on it that have to be hit, right? When there's 1 micro switch, right? The replacement for this is easier. The comfort for this might be easier for some people. The ergonomics is probably a lot better. And then the fact that it is the fastest response time when it comes to actually buttons over a joystick, Hitbox and Xbox reign supreme. I think that these are the 2 best controllers when it comes to competitive advantage in fighting games. And if you disagree, it's probably just because you really love your arcade stick or really love your little D-pad. This comes in a close second, right? So I'm going to just give these 2 a tie. Hitbox is probably the best. There's an honorable mention. The cross up. There was a point in time where people wanted this. People wanted this bad boy. This dude, this little doohickey right here. Where people were talking about maybe banning this. I suck at using the D-pad for fighting game inputs. I mainly use the analog stick. Yo. That's not normal. You're weird for that, but that's fine. As long as you're enjoying fighting games. Who cares? Maybe, just maybe, you should try something like one of these two. Or this. Right? Maybe. Just a thought. Because the D-pad on the Dualshock 4 might just be bad. It might just be trash for you, right? It might not be something that you can use. But something like this is probably better. Right? And there's also the Hori Fighting... The new Hori Fighting Commander, the Hori Fighting Commander Octa, right? There's the new one, but I think that would need an adapter because I haven't made a PS5 version, PS4 version. It's only on Xbox. I'm like that because I play a lot of KOF and Smash. KOF, you also should not be using the analog stick, but whatever, that's fine. I understand, right? Everyone has their own preferences and way that they play the game. So if you want to use your controller, your center controller as an analog with the analog controls, sure, whatever, no problem. I would recommend trying something like this. Even though it has a D-pad. It is a disc D-pad, but it's better than the one on the Xbox 360. But I do think something like this, the cross-up, is an honorable mention. Now, the thing about the cross-up is, it's meant for shortcuts. It is not actually meant to be a hitbox and a joystick at the same time. And the reason for that is because the placement of the directional buttons is really bad when it comes to actually using both. The joystick and the buttons, and then trying to like simultaneously do some sort of a button, right? Like you say you want to do, I don't know, a very fast down forward, a very fast like electric, right? That makes sense on something like this because the placement of the movement button, right, up at the top, because you don't need up, which is at the bottom. But say you're trying to tiger knee something, you're going to be doing the input with the joystick, pressing the jump button and the other button slightly after, right? So say it's like medium punch. You're doing quarter circle back, medium punch jump. Do you know how fucking awkward that is for your hands to do? That is not very ergonomic. So at that point, yo, thank you so much for the resub, Kaiji, appreciate you. So for something like that, right, for something like doing shortcuts, I still think that the hitbox is easier. Right, this is for someone who's transitioning and is not sure if they really want to play on an arcade stick or if they really want to play on a hitbox. So just get them both. Fuck it, just put them both together. Fuck it. Put them together. Cross-ups are sick, but I think the cross-ups are meant for the shortcuts. They're not meant to be played on as a, like, the cross-up should be a transitional piece into a normal hitbox, honestly. Honestly, if I'm being quite honest. I think that a standard hitbox or even a mixbox is just better. Zero Caracalis. Yo, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that, dude. We played Halo the other day. You're sick. I'm not so sick. But thank you for the follow. Yeah, so there's the arcade stick, the thing you're gonna see probably the most, right behind the pad. Are cross-ups banned? No, cross-ups are not banned, and they should not be banned, because if a cross-up is banned, you should also ban a hitbox and a mixbox, because these have the same shortcuts. Now, the reason why I don't think any of these controllers should be banned is because if this was a shooting game, if we were playing shooting games, we were playing MOBAs, we were playing card games, generally if something does not completely ruin the game, they don't ban it in those communities, right? What they do is they use the tool in front of them to perform better, right? So, I don't know. Let's look at it this way. In League of Legends, you want really high FPS. In shooting games, you want really high FPS. So they don't say, I don't think anyone should play on 120 FPS with a 144 hertz monitor, 144 FPS with a 144 hertz monitor. I don't know how that works. No, I don't think that that's okay. I think we should just ban it. We should all play on 60 hertz monitors with 60 FPS only. And we should never run tournaments at a higher FPS than that. No way. That's broken. That's ridiculous. They don't do that. They just say, well, I'm going to buy this sick 240 hertz monitor and play at 240 FPS and fucking kick ass on my 1440p ultra resolution monitor. That's what they're going to do, right? So why ban the tool instead of embracing it? On the developer side, they can do things like making sure that the controller can't do things that they don't want the controllers to do, right? So if your game cannot handle people pressing forward and back at the same time, patch it so that it can handle people pressing forward and back at the same time, and then it gives you a neutral instead of giving you holding forward or holding back, depending on which one you pressed first. A lot of older fighting games have that issue, but there is certain games where these styles of controllers are banned, honestly. But I want to show you something. The cross-up is just a big Dualshock. That's all this is. Do you know why? Because this also has 2 movement methods. You have this. I can hold back here and then hold forward here. And now I have neutral, which means that if I double tap, it gives me a back because it goes to neutral then back again. So if I double tap forward while holding back, I get a backdash in Street Fighter. Vice versa, if I'm holding forward, and this is instant, and I tap this, oops, wrong stick, and I tap this, kind of awkward, but it's doable, right? If you really want to make it happen, you can make it happen. And you tap back twice, you get a frame perfect forward dash. So look at that. You're probably better off holding this, holding the analog and then pressing the button. You're probably better off doing that because the button has less travel than the analog stick, right? Looking to tiger knee something, you can do the input here and then jump and then press the input. You can do that on a pad. That's all doable on a pad. So if we want to ban the cross up, we need to ban a pad because it does the exact same thing, but without the additional buttons right here. That's all it is. It just looks scary. Looking at something like this and not understanding it, you just want to get rid of it. You're like, oh no, no, get rid of it. But in all honesty, a pad and a hitbox are better than the cross-up because of the placement of the cross-up's buttons. This only works for shortcuts. This works however you need it to all the time for multiple. You use the analog and the D-pad sometimes? Yeah. So in games like Street Fighter 4, you could do this crazy thing with Geef where you could walk forward and then dash, and while you're dashing, you could do a 720 while you were in your dash buffer. So you could dash into Geef's super. I don't remember what the fuck it's called. I don't remember. SPD. Is it an SPD? Super SPD? I don't know. Whatever his ultra was, right? You could actually do a walking or a dashing 720 ultra on the pad. That same thing, if you're quick enough and good enough, I don't know how the fuck you're gonna do it. Do it on cross up. They didn't ban the pad for that. They didn't say that it was against the rules. Why ban the cross up if you don't want to ban a pad? That's just my 2 cents. But I think that logically these are where we should end up as fighting game players, right? I love arcade sticks, but I want to get myself a Mixbox. Honestly, I really do. I want to get myself a Mixbox because I'm very comfortable with left down, up, right. And there are certain games where movement feels really odd for me on a stick because of the way that, you know, I have learned how to move in most other 3D fighters, like games like DOA, Virtua Fighter, and Soul Calibur. Tekken's movement is a problem. It is very hard for me to do KBDs on stick, but it's very easy for me to do KBDs on keyboard. I literally have practiced it before and it was baby easy and I was like, holy shit, this is so sick. I want to get myself a Mixbox. Hitbox, you can do the same thing. All those shortcuts also work. My Hitbox is so fun. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I saw that you sent me that you got it, and it makes me like, and I have a buddy at Locals who also plays on Hitbox, and he was like, hey, just try my Hitbox. Fuck it. Don't even worry about buying one yet. Just try my Hitbox. And I was like, no, I'm gonna buy a Mixbox, but trying Hitbox isn't gonna work for me, but I appreciate it. Mixbox, I'm looking into it. Yeah, this is the one I want to get. You probably don't need both. Honestly, I think for 2D games, you're better off with something like a Hitbox because jump is its own separate button, so you can always have 4 fingers on the controller, right? And then your pinky's just kind of doing nothing, kind of hanging out, being fancy. But over here, you have to slide maybe either your ring finger or your middle finger, whichever one you're using for down. You have to slide that to up whenever you want to jump, or whenever you want to do like a motion in the tiger knee. But I play a lot of 2D games, so it doesn't matter to me, and I'm just more comfortable on a keyboard than I am with weird face button shenanigans. But yeah, I think that was a little bit of a tangent, right? But I think that this is a pretty good talk on controllers and their portability, because of course these are way less portable than a pad, right? This is the least competitive advantage. Pads and hitboxes and mixboxes and stuff are what we should probably be playing on if we want a competitive advantage. If you don't care, you're playing for fun, you're gonna have a good time, Play on whatever you are most comfortable with and whatever gives you the most enjoyment, right? Easy peasy. But if you're asking me competitively what I think is the best, Hitboxing makes one. It's just me. I like keyboard. I play Brawlhalla on keyboard. I mentioned that earlier, actually, is that a lot of Brawlhalla pros actually don't play on pad or stick. They just play on some sort of a keyboard, or they bring something like a Mixbox that works on whatever PC that the LAN happens to be running on. They get something like this, like a button box that has the WASD input, because it just feels more natural, right? Coming from a game where you played it on PC for so long. So comfortability is a big factor. Maybe portability is also a factor, right? I think the hitbox isn't very heavy now, the newer hitboxes, as long as you don't get like a custom-made all fight sticks hitbox, like with like a steel chassis or an aluminum chassis, you're getting something like this, but not too heavy. Just play on whatever you think is the best for you, whatever the best for your situation is, and whatever your competitive, if you're looking for a competitive advantage or not, right? Because sometimes it doesn't matter to you guys. Anyways, this is Beanie Thuggish, another YouTube video in the books. Hopefully another like from you guys at home watching this shit on the YouTube. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys for hanging out. Have a good one. Peace.